Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are doing awesome, and I'm so glad that you are able to join me with our music lesson today. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about um, different families of musical instruments, okay? So, when you go to watch an orchestra or a rock band or any kind of musical group, you're always going to see different kinds of instruments, usually. Um, Now, those different kinds of instruments make their own unique kinds of sounds. So, what I've got over here beside me are examples of the four instrument families. All right. So, the four instrument families are woodwinds, percussion, brass, and strings. Okay. Woodwinds, percussion, brass, and strings. So, in all of those families, there are different instruments, and some of the families are really big, and some of the families don't have as many instruments in them. Okay, but we're going to start with one of my favorites, and that is the percussion family. Okay, so this instrument right here that we're looking at, some of you might know what this is. This is called a tambourine. So, percussion instruments are any instrument that you can hit, shake, or scrape. Everybody say that with me. Hit, shake, or scrape. So when you hit, shake, or scrape one of these instruments, it's going to make a different kind of sound. So like the tambourine, this kind has a head on the front, and you can hit it. Okay? You can also hold this instrument around the edge and shake it. Okay? Now, with this head on here, you could take your hand and scrape the front of that, okay? So, a lot of times when people talk about percussion instruments, the first thing they think of is drums. And drums are part of the percussion family, but they're definitely not the only ones. So we have all different kinds. We have tambourines, we have maracas that you can shake, we do have drums that you can hit, we have the güiro that you can scrape and that you can also tap as well. So there are tons and tons of percussion instruments, and I don't even know how many there really are. So anything that you can hit, shake, or scrape. Now, that also means that almost anything can be a percussion instrument. So if you can find a cardboard box, or you can find, like I've done in some of my other videos, I've done like a coffee can, and you can hit it with your hand, or you can hit it with some other kind of implement, like a stick or a pencil or something like that. So there's just all kinds of percussion instruments, and I think that's one reason I really like percussion, and they all have their own unique kind of sound. All right, so next family we have, I'm going to go to this one. Okay, and some of you might know, let me back up. Some of you might know what this instrument is. This is a trumpet, and a trumpet is part of the brass family. Okay, so what are some things about the brass family? So one thing you'll notice about the brass instruments is they all have some kind of a mouthpiece like this, and it goes in the end. And that's where you blow into, and the sound comes out this end, so which is called the bell. So we have a mouthpiece, and we have a bell. Another thing you'll notice about brass instruments is the number of buttons or the number of keys. So a trumpet only has 3. There are trumpets that have 4, and then there are other instruments that have 5 or 6 buttons, or valves we call them. Brass instruments are made of metal, okay? So you have to be really careful with these, because if you drop them, they can ding, they can scratch, and they're very expensive. So if you ever get the chance to hold or try a brass instrument, be very careful with it. And that's really about all there is. Now, there's not as many brass instruments as there are percussion instruments. There are a few main ones, like the trumpet, the tuba, the trombone, the French horn, and then there are other ones off of that that are similar. Like we have piccolo trumpets, and we have C trumpets, and we have E flat trumpets, and all these different kinds. But the trumpet, tuba, trombone, and horn are the main ones. Okay, so trumpet, brass instrument. All right. Now the next thing, what do we got? Let's go to another type of wind instrument. All right. So some of you are probably screaming and shouting because you know exactly what this instrument is, and you probably know what it is because our good friend Squidward Tentacles plays this instrument. And if you know, this is called a clarinet. All right. So the clarinet is a woodwind instrument. All right. Now that does not mean that this instrument is made of wood. Okay. This one is actually made of plastic. There are some that are made of wood, but this one is made of plastic, and there are other woodwind instruments that are made of metal. Okay, so what are some things about the woodwinds? Now, something that you probably notice about this is it has a lot more keys on it than the brass instrument did, the trumpet. Okay, so that's going to be a big hint that it is a woodwind instrument. So you can't look at the color or what it's made of or anything like that. Look at the number of keys, and that can give you a good idea if it's a woodwind instrument. So to play the clarinet, now I can't play the clarinet. I'm no good at it. It also has a mouthpiece up here at the top, and you put your lip under over your teeth, and then you put it in your mouth, and then you blow. And on the back here, this is a really thin piece of wood, really thin. Let's see if I can show you that. And that is called a reed. And most woodwind instruments have a reed. Not all, most do. And they can be a reed like this. This is a single reed. And then we have some that are have a double reed on them, like something like the oboe or the bassoon. All right, so some other examples would be like the clarinet. We have the oboe. We have the bassoon. We have the flute. Now, what's interesting about the flute is it's made of metal, and it does not use a reed. Okay, the flute acts like if you've ever taken like a Coke bottle and blown across the top to get it to make a sound. That's how a flute makes its sound, and you hold it differently. You hold it out like this. The clarinet, you hold it out in front of you like this. Okay, so number of keys. Some use a reed and some do not, but the flute does have a lot of keys on it. So again, that's a good way to tell if it's a woodwind instrument. All right, so we've covered 3. We've had percussion, we've had brass, and we've had woodwinds. Now, what was left? The strings. All right, so there are a lot of string instruments as well, and there are orchestral strings and other types of strings that are not orchestral instruments. Okay, and what I mean by orchestral is that you would see them in an orchestra. Okay, so this is an example of an orchestral string instrument. And if you know what this is, or if you don't know what this is a violin. All right. So what's cool about these orchestral string instruments, is that they almost all look the same. They just get bigger as they go. So the violin is the smallest of all of them. So it makes the highest sounds, okay, or the highest pitches. And then the next one is the viola. It's a little bit bigger, so it makes a lower sound. Then the cello. Now the cello is different because you have to hold it in front of you and you have to sit down to play it. The violin and the viola, you can stand up or sit down to play this instrument. Okay. And then the last one is the bass, or the double bass. And you almost always have to stand up to play that. It's really tall. It's about 6 feet tall. Or you have to sit on a stool that kind of raises you up to help you reach the strings. All right, so we had the violin, the viola, we had the cello, and we had the double bass, okay? So, now, oh, I forgot one thing. What makes this a string instrument? The strings, okay? So, if it has strings on it, it's a string instrument, okay? But these ones, the one I just went over, are the orchestral strings. So you'll probably notice that instruments like the guitar or the ukulele were not in that list, okay? This is still a string instrument. It has strings, but you're probably not going to see this instrument in an orchestra, all right? So you just got to kind of see the difference. Now, I can show you the one thing between these two, all right? This instrument has what we call frets, all right? Now, on this one, that's a sticker that's on the front, but if I took that sticker off, this would just be one solid piece of wood right there, and you wouldn't have these lines going across it, okay? So the instruments like the ukulele, the guitar, the banjo, they all have frets to help you place your fingers in the right spot. This one does not have frets, but I put this little sticker on here to help me know where to place my fingers until I get good enough, and then maybe I can take that off. All right, so those are the 4 different kinds of instruments. Why do we need so many different instruments? Well, they all play their own part. They all play different sounds. So if you went to a concert and you heard only one type of instrument, I'm sure it would sound great. But when you add other instruments, then you get all these different sounds, and it sounds really unique, okay? Like there are bands of just brass instruments. They're called brass bands because we have high instruments that make high sounds and instruments that make low sounds. So you can get some unique sounds out of just brass instruments. But when you add in the woodwinds and the percussion and the strings, then you just get this really cool sound that just goes together really well, okay? And an example of that would be like listening to an orchestra, because an orchestra is going to have all 3 of these. Not as much percussion in an orchestra, but it is going to have those other ones, okay? So I hope that you guys enjoyed this lesson. I hope that you learned something. Look at the other activities that are posted along with this video and see if you can distinguish the brass, the percussion, the woodwinds, and the strings. All right, so you guys take care of yourself, and please remember to have fun, and I will see you in the next lesson.